Absolute Bedlam. Absolute Bedlam. Absolute Bedlam. Talking about topics and stuff. Absolute Bedlam. Absolute Bedlam. Absolute Bedlam podcast. Who? What? Where? Why?
It's just going to be absolute bedlam now.
There we go.
Nestled deep within the heart of Yorkshire lies a rum so smooth that once it passes your lips, you'll never look back again. Combining the smooth tones of sweet fresh ginger, rich treacle and a lick of Yorkshire honey, Absolute Bedlam are proud to be partnered with the true Angel of the North. Two Lasses Spirits. Use code BedlamUK at checkout.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Absolute Bedlam podcast, where, quite frankly, I just spoil you guys every week with content and hope that you listen. There's now an incredibly toxic stat thing that comes up on my phone if I want to check the listens on Spotify. And it now tells me who's actually followed/subscribed to my Spotify, which is not a good mental health tool to all the people that made that on Anchor. However, it is nearly at 100, so I must be doing something right. So that's good. So there we go. Right, we got Tim Haines on the podcast tonight. How's it going? You all right?
Yeah, man, very good, very good. And you?
Good. Yeah, I'm all right. It's nice to have someone on that isn't from America, and I've only ever met once, because I was thinking about this earlier, and I think we've probably known each other for about 10/11 years.
Yeah, something like that, isn't it? Something like that.
And we kind of met through music and then realised that we both had similar
Yeah.
professions, which is usually the wrong way round.
Yeah.
So yeah, there we go. So I always ask everyone the same question at the start, because I like to get a bit of a background on the person. And obviously it's good for the listeners to be able to get some context as to why I've got you on, which is, how was school?
Oh God, what a question that is. Right, so I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, I hated it because most young people do. You often just have to kind of muddle through. I wasn't not going to say I was well behaved, but I wasn't terrible. But you know, I survived it, did okay, I guess. Went to college, did some stuff, survived that, and then ended up sort of going to work, and the rest is a tale's history. But there's nothing terribly exciting to tell, really, other than that.
At school, what camp were you in? Were you a goth? Were you a chav? Were you a grebo?
That's a good question. I was definitely a metalhead towards the end of my school life. I went through a stage where I was listening to a lot of stuff like Cypress Hill. So I had there's a bit of a rap rock element as well, because loads of the kids at school were into that, and I think some of them even today are still listening to that kind of style. So it's really hard to quantify which group I was in. I definitely wasn't a popular kid though. Like that's a definite no. Like I was definitely not one of the popular ones. You know.
Yeah, completely. I managed to sort of intertwine myself into each group quite well, but never too much that I was like dedicated to the chavs or the emos or the cool kids or the sports kids or anything like that. It was very much, I remember at one point, this isn't me bragging, by the way, I don't just come on here and talk about how popular I was, but there was like, it honestly, Tim, it felt like there was a bidding war at one point for people to walk home with at school. I had like 4 different groups of people come up to me and go, "Can you walk home with us?" And I was like, "What? This is weird. Like, I just want to go home. Like, I don't really care who I go with. It's a weird situation to be in." But there we go.
I can't say I was ever that lucky.
Yeah. What was the naughtiest thing that you can remember doing at school that you wish to disclose?
That I wish to disclose.
Yeah.
Oh, mate, I'm not sure that is fit for public consumption. To be honest with you, like I was a naughty boy in secondary school at points, and it probably isn't best to go on the internet if you follow me.
That's fair enough. If you can remember your report cards, what was the sort of sentence that would sort of sit with you the most? So mine was always, Ben is very good at a lot of things, but he doesn't really apply himself.
Yeah, quite similar to me. They sort of said, oh, he's obviously got some ability in some subjects, but doesn't apply himself properly, and at worst can be just unruly, which is probably accurate. So yeah.
Nice. So I've got a bit of a monologue for you, which was, Tim is someone who understands that being a musician in a small town is so much more than showing up and playing music. And the reason I wrote that is because I've noticed throughout your sort of musical career, we'll go into each band. That'll be
Yeah.
like the main bulk of this episode. But
Yeah.
in Biproxy specifically,
Yeah.
you were in Biproxy for a long time.
Yeah.
And from an outsider's perspective, it felt like you'd done a lot of that as a self-managed band. So
Yeah.
is that accurate, or did you have a manager or a booking agent behind you, or did you just all just have a goal?
No, it was all done ourselves. I can't claim to be the sort of the credit behind the sort of the booking side of things or the running of the show side of things. So that honor probably went to mostly to Chris. I don't know if the Biproxy boys listen to your podcast, but if they do, then massive love to those guys, because obviously I'm no longer in the band. I left last year after a long time. But yeah, it was all kind of done by ourselves. We used to handle all the bookings of the shows. We used to handle all of the logistics. Basically everything was done by the band, because we didn't see the point in actually getting a sort of a manager, in inverted commas, on board for what we were doing at the time.
Yeah, I think, what am I trying to say? So I think in a place like Weymouth, you have to have that attitude if you want to actually get anywhere, because no one's going to do it for you. And if they are going to do it for you, then you're going to lose like 40 to 50% of your revenue as a band, especially playing covers. You can earn between £200 and £400 a night. But if you've got someone booking that gig for you, then, and obviously something I learned from Billy Sheehan actually was, if you're a free piece, really think about if you want to get that fourth member, or think about if you can just do it as a free piece, because that will affect your earnings at the end of the night, especially if you're getting paid cash in hand. So if you're getting paid £200 and you're a four piece, you'll get paid 50 quid each.
Yeah.
Whereas as a free piece, you'll get paid about £66 each. So that's better than 50, obviously. So it's about optimization. And I'm guessing that each person in Biproxy, as an example, had a second function other than playing music. So, like, for example, Chris Brown might have looked after the social media. You might have looked after the driving. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. You can. It's all about bottom lines at the end of the day. You've got to do it because you want to do it. You've got to enjoy doing it, but you can't do it for a loss. So you've got to really kind of balance out those numbers. So, we did I sort of handled a lot of the logistics in terms of getting the drums and the PA there, because obviously we ran all our own backline as well. Chris was very much a social media guy, although Jason did a little bit of that as well. And then, through the lineup changes, the singers we had, or the, guitarists we had, each sort of did different things. We had a few lineup changes over the years. But you're definitely right. There's definitely an element of everybody does their own little bit to just kind of help the whole thing. Because if you had one guy doing all the work, then what happens is that person gets really pissed off and leaves.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh no, we're down somebody who used to do loads of work. So you've got to replace the musician, but you've also got to replace the guy that does the stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And the wheels can come off really quickly at that point. So
you get a flight risk that it could all bottom out at any moment if this person feels that they can do better somewhere else.
Yeah.
But so just quickly backpedaling a tiny bit. So how did you first get into playing drums? What was the sort of divider in your head that was like, right, I don't want to play guitar, I don't want to play bass, I don't want to sing? What made you gravitate towards playing at the back of the room to X amount of people with the world's biggest amount of equipment and lugging it all around the country?
Yeah. So I think it really starts from the fact that when I was a kid, I was a singer in my like middle school or primary school choir, so I used to have quite a good singing voice, but I didn't really want to do that. I also tried playing guitar and just found that it wasn't something that I really enjoyed. And then I started listening to more Iron Maiden when I was, relatively young, and absolutely fell in love with what Nico McBrain did behind a drum set. And it was at that moment I thought, actually, I want to do what that guy does because that looks really cool, you know. And then so I bought my first drum kit. I think when I eventually bought my first kit, I was about, well, I don't know, maybe 19, and then just kind of started from there, and just got into loads of other drummers that I really just looked up to. Guys like Chris Adler from Lamb of God, Martin Lopez from Opeth. Just these crazy dudes who were just doing this mad stuff, and it just kind of snowballed. And before I know it, I'm like joining bands and playing shows and just having a whale. Just making loads of noise. And so it kind of started with Nico. I was actually fortunate enough to meet him in 2012, which was like a massive thing for me. That was an absolute bucket list moment. But yeah, so it all started with Iron Maiden, really, and then it just kind of developed from there.
Do you think there's a psychological component to drummers getting out there and just being a bit rubbish and then eventually getting better through playing with musicians? Because I hear the expression bedroom guitarist a lot, but it feels to me like drummers specifically want to go out and find a sort of crew of people.
It's an interesting question because I know a lot of musicians who are, quite accomplished players, but they just don't get out there and play. Whether it is a nerve thing, whether it's just that they haven't got the right project, whatever it is, I don't really know. But with drummers, we see, we just like being out there in a bar or a club or a place full of people listening to music. We want to get out there and make these people listen, and try and make these people kind of sit up and take notice that actually we are here and we're going to try and entertain you, and you're going to hopefully enjoy what we're doing. I think drummers are in a unique position in that regard.
When you are in a active band that's gigging sort of once a week, once every other week, do you still find time to practice playing drums, or do you find that the practice is the rehearsal, if that makes sense?
No, you've got to practice. You've got to practice as much as you can, really, because the more you do before showtime, the more polished and finished you are at shows. And the more polished and finished you are at shows, the better you come off with a venue. And the idea is you go to a venue and you're not just thinking about the first show, you're thinking about the next one, the next two, the next three, because a lot of venues will take a punt on a band that they might not have ever heard before. And then they're, oh yeah, we'll bring him in, get him in, and you'll negotiate a show. And then if you get in there and play your ass off, you get invited back. If you get in there and you haven't done the work, you might not. So actually, for me personally, like, practice is a huge part of the whole thing. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to like play through the set. You can play exercises, you can play technical exercises, you can work on for drummers, you can work on things like rudiments, you can work on reading. There's all sorts of things you can do that just help you to be a better musician, which means that when you step onto the stage, in inverted commas, at showtime, you do better on that night. And to me, that's really important.
Yeah, I think it helps you sort of limber up and be prepared. And then, you can actually put a decent show on, rather than, I haven't played drums in 4 months, I haven't played bass in 3 weeks, that sort of stuff. Because I used to make a conscious effort to practice like 4 hours a week. Sometimes that would be 1 hour a night, and have a night off. But that ability to constantly want to learn songs and play my own set was a really important discipline to learn, I found.
It's practice is one of those things that it doesn't matter if you do like half an hour a day or an hour a day, 3 or 4 days a week. That's better than doing like a really long practice session of a weekend, because you're reinforcing stuff in a more kind of sort of measured way. So I think it's really important. I remember I've turned up to auditions with, well, I say auditions, I've turned up to like first rehearsals or kind of quasi auditions with bands that I later joined. And, because I was prepared, I'd done the work,
Yeah.
You know, I was confident that I could turn up to that space and actually deliver what they wanted me to deliver. And shortly after that, we were playing shows.
Yeah.
So preparation is really important. I mean, I'm talking like I'm some sort of really sort of fortunate dude, but I'm just a small town guy who just wants to do the best he can behind his instrument. So that was what I set out to do.
Yeah.
And you know, I'd like to think I've done all right, but it's just one of those things.
I think there's no point in doing it if you're not going to go full on.
Yeah, your heart's got to be in it. It's entirely too much work to not have your heart in it, because being in a band is a lot of effort. You know, it's not something that you can just do and devote like half an hour a week to. It doesn't work like that. It kind of becomes it becomes kind of a sort of an obsession, really. You just almost everything you do is kind of related in some way to the band you're in. So to turn up and half-ass it, you're just doing people a disservice. So it's just one of those.
Always put your full arse into everything, people.
Yeah.
There's no point in doing it if you're not going to go for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there we go. What was the first band that you were in, Tim?
Oh, the very first band I was in. My God, we're going back a little bit now. So, the very first band I was in was a band called Shallow Bay. You know, I can't even remember the years this was, but it was a long time ago. You know, it was we're sort of back in the sort of middle to late 2000s, you know, 2007, 2008, you know, maybe 2006, you know, that kind of time frame, a little while ago. And that was a kind of a mixture of covers and originals. There was all sorts in there. And that was great. You know, I was an awful lot younger then than I am now. And I thought I was a rock star. It's great, really good fun. I loved it. Going off, playing pub shows, like, you know, just having a whale of a time. And then, you know, that went the way it did, and I moved on to what started off as the Resistance, then eventually morphed into Biproxy. Then a few years after Biproxy, I then joined a band called the Black Lines, which then became eventually the Modern Disciples, and that's the kind of the bands I spent the longest time in. Also did a bit of work with another band called Pressure Point for a while, and that was more of a like kind of metal covers band. That was really cool, but it didn't last as long as I was hoping for. Yeah, so my first band was the band Shallow Bay. That was back in, as I say, the sort of mid to late 2000s.
Yeah, I remember when I was in my first ever band, I was singing out of all things. I decided then quickly to go to guitar, and then I realized that there was an abundance of guitarists in Weymouth, so I actually wanted to play bass, and I didn't stop playing bass. Still play to this day. It's good to have a reliable bassist. So I think Craig Vincent, if that was his name, it was all a bit of a blur, mate, to be honest. I've slept since then. He came and watched my first ever band and gave us some critique, and I think he ended up playing Nothing Else Matters on some sort of acoustic guitar that was in the studio at the time. He just kind of cobbled it all together. But I think he was in Shallow Bay, and he mentioned that Shallow Bay was a song name. Is that what that is?
Yeah. So the name was taken from a song by a band called Breaking Benjamin called Shallow Bay, because the kind of lead guitarist and singer in that band at the time was, and I believe still is, a fairly large Breaking Benjamin fan. So he kind of borrowed the name from a song of theirs. Shout out to the Shallow Bay lot if they actually listen to this, because it's been a little while. But you know, they're still people I know. We spent a lot of time together, and you know, if they're listening, then hi guys. But yeah, so we kind of stole it from the Breaking Benjamin track of that name, because it sounded really cool and it just kind of worked. So that was where that came from.
Do you think back in those days when you didn't really know what rejection was, or you didn't really understand what the challenge of the music industry was, that everything was a bit cleaner and there was a sort of never say die attitude because you didn't really know the other side of it, if that makes sense? There were no complications because you just played shows and everything else was a bonus.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. You know, I was a young lad who was just out playing shows. Like the business side of it, the more kind of cutthroat nature of it was completely lost on me at the time, because I just wanted to get out and play shows.
Yeah.
I was like, people are coming to watch me like play drums with loads, like a few of my friends, and play some songs and play shows, and we're getting paid. Like, I thought, I was like, this is really fucking cool.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
happy. I didn't at the time. I didn't really realize the kind of the business side, almost the business side of it was going to be so important. And then it was like only as I got a bit older and got a bit more worldwide, I was like, wait a minute, there's a whole other side to this that I just hadn't considered because I was having too much fun playing shows.
Yeah.
So
Something that I'll never get over is when Desert Rose was a thing. We played a jam night, and it was on Christmas Eve, and I think it was something like 2008, something like that. I can't really remember, but I remember Steve from Finn's coming
yes.
up to each of Desert Rose and giving us all £5 note. And my singer looked at me, and I thought he was going to kick off because he was a bit of a diva, Sam. I thought he was going to go, what the fuck is this? This is a joke, right? And he was like, oh my God, I've never earned money from doing something that I enjoy before. And that was quite a sort of somber moment. And then we played Finn's a couple of months afterwards, and we were getting paid like £250 a night. And one of our real watering holes, and I think this is probably similar for you guys, because I know that you played the George a lot as by proxy, but the Rum Shack, mate, that place was paying us like £300 a night, and there was 5 of us, so we were actually making profit. But we had to bring all of the gear: PA, drum kit, bass amps, guitar cabs, everything. So, what do you think of that? What was your sort of favourite venues to play?
I think there was some. The George was always a fun place to play. We always got a decent crowd. Okay, it wasn't necessarily the sort of highest quality of establishment back in those days. It is, as I understand it, is much better now. But we were always well received. We normally had fun, and we got paid at the end of the night. So that was one of the venues that I quite liked to play. I always enjoyed playing Finn's. We played for Steve on more occasions than I care to count over the years. We were fortunate enough to get a couple of like New Year's Eve slots there as well. So they were always a really good thing. It's good fun. It's really hard to pick out one venue because I played an awful lot of venues in my time actually playing and gigging as often as we were, because at points we were out, twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. So we were out a lot. And there's lots of venues that we played. So I can't really pick a favorite one, but the two that stick in my mind are playing the George and playing Finn's. Yeah.
One thing that really got me with Biproxy is it had a bit of a Desert Rose type sort of attitude where if there were gigs available at a town, then you would take them. I think you played a place sort of outside of Weymouth called The Ship, if I'm not mistaken.
We've played loads of shows outside of Wales. We went to the Channel Islands in 2012. We got invited to play a festival on Sark. We did a tour in 2012 as well. We've done lots of stuff sort of out and about away from Dorset over the years, but I mean primarily the local shows were our kind of bread and butter for a bit.
Yeah, of course.
So actually, the further you go to travel, it eats into your bottom line. And like I said earlier, you don't do it for money.
No.
Purely you've got to do it because you want to do it, but it takes money to do it, and you can't do it for a loss. It's one of those things. So, but it was nice to get the odd shout from out of town, like, "Oh, guys, can you like come play for us?" We're like, "Yeah, great, why not?" Yeah. It's really cool.
I think that's something that I was kind of getting at earlier with the whole independent, not getting a booking agent and stuff like that, because sometimes when you have more friends in the scene and you have more bands to sort of, so like as an example, if you're an originals band and you've only got a 30-minute set, you then have to lean on other bands because you might be opening for them, you might be main support for them. You're probably not going to be a headliner at 30 minutes.
No.
And Biproxy to me striked me as a band that could do all of those things, and you were willing to go further afield because you were only really relying on yourselves to produce that travel. Like, you weren't getting a tour bus, you weren't plastering the town with posters, you were kind of just using your power and your influence and what was available to you at that time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. There was a lot of, obviously, the social media has been a massive tool for getting shows, because just everybody's on some sort of social media. You can really spread out and get in touch with people that otherwise might not be accessible to you. So Chris was a bit of a social media guru for that. He was always really, really good at picking up shows from out of town and other shows and places that we wouldn't necessarily have been looking for if we were looking for shows. But it was just about getting out there and saying, "Hey, we want to book some shows. Does anybody want to book a band?" And more often than not, we get something. Obviously, there were quieter periods through the course of the year with winter and stuff, but yeah, that's just the year, isn't it? That happened. But
Absolutely.
we usually had options somewhere if when we went sort of looking, which was always nice.
Yeah, completely. I remember as well, you guys in Biproxy, I'm just going to keep using Biproxy as an example because that's where I felt like I got to know you the most, was
you
had an email address. And I was like, oh shit, these guys have got a Gmail address. And then quickly after, we created a Desert Rose DR at gmail.com address, which might still exist now. I don't really know. But it enabled you to obviously manage the bookings centrally, and you all had access to it on your phones and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and, it was just an easier point of contact for everybody, really. Just to make sure that we didn't miss stuff, because the worst case scenario is that you book something with somebody and then something comes up that somebody has to cancel at short notice. And we used to hate doing that because we just did. It's just not a very good thing to have to do to somebody. So we were always quite sort of strong on making sure that people knew what was going on. So that was one of the reasons I think that was done.
One of the worst things that ever happened to me was we played in Desert Rose. We played Bournemouth. We played a pub called the O'Neill's, which is a massive chain. It's kind of like a Wetherspoons. And our left-handed guitarist, which is important to remember, he's left-handed,
right,
forgot to bring his guitar.
Oh no!
To the gig.
Shocking!
So
that is horrible.
He had to drive from Bournemouth to Portland in about 45 minutes.
Oh no!
And run into our practice space and unlock the door to our storage area where we kept all of our gear. And it's things like that. That's what I'm getting at really with the central email address, is you've all got a clear line of communication. You're saying to the promoter, look, we can bring cymbals, we can bring guitars, we can bring heads, but we can't bring cabs. Just that constant sort of back and forth that gets generated, and then a promoter goes, oh, can you bring a drum kit? I'll pay you 10 quid. And you're like, what the fuck, man? Like, what's that? Like, what if a kid on before me smashes one of my toms?
We used to take quite a lot of gear to shows, because as I say, predominantly we'd run our own backline, so that would be everything. That would be amps, cabs, kit, PA, the whole lot. It's one of the reasons that I've always owned big vehicles, because most of it used to go in the back of my car, or in the back of my van, because we always thought we might as well just do it ourselves, because then we know we've got contingency plans if stuff goes tits up. Because the number of times we've turned up to shows where things have been shared, and we've been like, "Where's this?" And they're like, "Have you not got it?" And we were like, "Well, yeah, we have," but like a lot of people perhaps wouldn't have, and it can totally derail the show. Honourable shout to my other half, who was our sort of front of house engineer for the longest time. She was an absolute godsend, and it would have several times. It would probably all fall to bits without her on shows. So she gets a huge honourable mention for A, putting up with me for as long as she has, and B, just being a hero as far as the shows. Really,
I was definitely an electrician first in Desert Rose and a bassist after. The amount of times I'd have to bring a kettle lead or an extension lead or a screwdriver, because I'd bring a backup bass and I'd have to change the pickup battery on it before we went on. Stuff like that, man.
Just teching everybody's gear before you even start.
That's it.
Absolutely.
We're going to go to a quick break. I'm going to grab a drink, and cheers for listening, guys, and we'll be right back very, very shortly. All right?
Yes.
Insert advert.
Absolute Bedlam.
Hello. Today I'm promoting a product called Set Surf 100% mineral sun cream, safe for sensitive skin and children. So we've got some products here. So we've got SPF 20 lip balm, mineral sunscreen, SPF 50 and water resistant sun cream, and my favourite, rash cream. So when I was out jogging quite a lot, this saved my bacon when I was running at stupid speeds, believe it or not, and going stupid lengths, and rash cream definitely helped me out. So yeah, reef safe, coral safe, www.setsurf.com, shop the range, use the code Bedlam20 for 20% off at checkout. Let them know that I've sent you, and yeah, enjoy.
Absolute Bedlam.
Welcome back. How we doing? All good?
Yeah, mate. Good. Just got another drink and crack on.
Drink, nice. Have you ever been interviewed before in your musical days, or?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. I think we've had a. Yeah, we did a bit with Wessex FM back in the Shallow Bay days.
Oh yeah.
We've done a couple of other kind of sort of little ones, but the Wessex one was probably the sort of the biggest thing we'd ever done in terms of actual interviews. But that was like ages ago. I can't even remember what we were asked. It was just like so long ago.
Yeah. Nice. So we've kind of gone through this already, but I want to know just sort of what's the word? The dot the I's and cross the T's. I don't know why I've got red light syndrome tonight. What keeps Tim motivated? What keeps you wanting to keep playing music and touring and playing shows and going to rehearsals and paying someone like Fuzzy £35? What keeps you going, and what keeps you sort of wanting more as a musician?
It's a very interesting question. So for me, playing music is a kind of a multifaceted thing. You know, it's about being in a band with people. Is you become you develop relationships, you become friends, and actually you get to go and share some really cool experiences with some people. And I quite like entertaining people as well. I quite like going to shows, playing songs that people either enjoy because they know them or want to listen to because they want to listen to a slightly different take on something, or in some cases some original music. And it's just that whole thing of just entertaining people, doing something that is a bit of adrenaline rush, a bit of kind of enjoyment, and just trying to have a fun time doing something that is physically quite demanding. Playing drums is a reasonably sort of demanding thing to do. What motivates me on a personal level is just the desire to be better. I'm always trying to improve as a person in both my kind of musical life, my personal life, my professional life. I'm always trying to move forward a little bit. Progress is, can be one step at a time, but I'm always trying to kind of push on and be better. That's the whole kind of thing that motivates me from a kind of as an individual. But there's the whole entertainment value and enjoyment of playing with a group of people as well. So there's a couple of answers to that, really.
So when you play as many shows as you have, and when you felt that you were on this sort of adventure with your friends and things like that, where, guys, where are we playing Sunday? I've completely forgot because I'm organising a Saturday, that sort of thing. Have you ever heard of the 1% rule?
No, I don't think I have.
The 1% rule is, how can we make the next show, podcast, movie, insert thing here, how can we make it slightly better? How can we refine it so we're not taking every single piece of gear that we have to rehearsal? How can we streamline the changeover between the bands? Like, are we going to keep sound checking the same song, or are we just going to keep randomly selecting a song out of the sky and sound checking that? And it's just about slightly marginal gains and just slightly getting closer to that perfect, if that's a thing, sort of Valhalla, sort of euphoric moment where you're like, right, we can now get there and sound check and be ready to play in 10 minutes.
I think, again, that's a really sort of odd question, because perfection is a myth. you are never going to turn up and have everything go so well that it's perfect.
Yeah.
Reality just doesn't allow that. What you can do is you can do a lot of the preparation. You do as much preparation as you can in terms of your gear and what you take with you before you leave.
Yeah.
But my experience playing the number of shows that I've played and playing in the places that I've played is that you always need something. It doesn't matter what it is. You always need something, and if you don't have it, then you're absolutely stuffed. So we were always, if anything, we were over prepared for almost every show we ever did.
Yeah.
The streamlining came from making sure that people were where they needed to be, 5 minutes before they needed to be there.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my kind of big things. I'd rather be somewhere 10 minutes early than be 5 minutes late. When it comes to things that I'm doing, that's something that I just do, and it's and it used to really annoy my bandmates because I would always be like, "What time are we getting there?" And they'd be like, "Oh, we'll get there at like 7." And I'm like, "Isn't that a bit late?" And they'd be like, "Mate, we're not on for like an hour and a half." It's like, yeah, but if something goes wrong, at least we've got more time. And it used to be a bit of a thing, because I'd always be somewhere early.
Yeah.
And they used to be like, "Why are you there so early?" And I'd be like, "Because I want to make sure we've got everything we need, and we've got plenty of time to correct it if we find that something's gone tits up, because things go wrong, and I just like to have the time to fix things."
I'm exactly the same. So I've been in so many bands with so many people that will show up late to everything, and it is absolutely one of the banes of my life that I'm somewhere 2 hours early and someone will be there 40 minutes late. Like, sound checks exist for a reason, and it's usually the people that are late to sound checks that get pissed that you haven't had a sound check. So there's that weird sort of timekeeping paradox thing of like, why didn't you just come at the time that I told you I was coming?
Yeah.
So yeah, have you ever experienced sort of musicians that just, I'm just going to do whatever I want, man. I'll show up when I want, and the gig will start when I think it will start. Had any musical divas in your life?
Yeah, there's always going to be the odd diva. I don't think anybody's been so bad that they have purposely made us late starting a show, but there have been times where I've been working with musicians who have turned up like an hour late, and we've been like, "We're on in 10 minutes. Where the hell have you been? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing?" Like, unless it's arranged. I mean, we've had a couple of situations where guys we've been working with have worked late or whatever, and they've gone, "Look, I'm not going to get there until maybe 20 minutes before we go on." And because it's arranged, you can like budget for it. But when somebody just doesn't turn up until like 10 minutes before the show, it's like, what is going on? Like, where have you been? You used to do my head in, but you just kind of go, right, you got to count to 10, take a deep breath, and then try and have a good show. Because I think I've played one show where I was pathologically angry with somebody. I won't go into the specifics, but like, I was so annoyed at somebody that I was red faced and steaming. I was furious, and the show just wasn't as fun because I was so pissed off. Like, I was really annoyed, and it just kind of dragged my vibe down, and so I didn't have any fun at all. So I try really hard not to get that annoyed at things. But yeah, so I've worked with a few divas, and they've had their foibles, but in the main, they've been good. They've been good people. They've just had a bit of a timekeeping issue, or they've been a bit sort of prima donna-esque about their position or whatever. But you get that. It's just...
There's something strange about putting creatives to a structure. There's something really counterintuitive to like creating a song out of something that you dreamt about and then trying to sell it as a commercial product and go to a news network or a radio station, as you described earlier, at a certain time. It just feels a bit sort of, you're trying to kind of cage me, if that makes sense. I think it does.
Yeah, it kind of does. I can't claim to be sort of massively creative. I'm not a songwriter, for example. I'm hopeless at writing lyrics. I can write like drum parts. I can write like drum sort of rhythms and beats and grooves for tracks if somebody gives me something to work with. But I can't write lyrics to save my life, so I'm perhaps not the best person to talk about the creative sort of mentality. But the people that I've worked with that have been like hyper creative, and there's been a few, there's been a few people I worked with who have been so unbelievably creative that they can just pull ideas out of thin air. They hate being told, "Oh, you have to be here at a certain time."
Yeah.
They're like, "But what if I'm like doing something creative?" I'm like, "Well, no, you still have to be there when we need you to be there." So yeah, you're absolutely right. You can it can feel for creative people, I would imagine, that they are kind of being caged or railroaded a little bit. Yeah. But that's just how that is. You can't really stop it. If you've got a time scale, you've got a time scale, and you've got to be there when you need to be there. It's a pain because sometimes you think I've got to be somewhere in like half an hour or 40 minutes, but like I've had something come up, so I'm going to be a bit late leaving. Of course, then you start rushing, and then when you rush, you forget stuff, and then that's when things go wrong. So
yeah, completely. Saying that, there has been a few gigs since you mentioned earlier the whole sort of we've got 10 minutes until we're on stage. Some of those gigs have been the best gigs I've ever played in my life because they've just been right. Ben, guitar lead, another guitar lead, restring your bass now. Do not go to Finn's and restring your bass. You're not mental. Take 2 basses with you, get in your car, get to Finn's, sound check or even line check, which is when you play like a verse of a song.
Yeah.
Play that set, get off stage and watch the other bands. And sometimes you just hit that sort of apex of like, right, we are here specifically for 25 minutes. We know what songs we're going to play. And you just hit this sort of level of optimization that's quite sort of euphoric.
Yeah.
You just all know your purpose. And there's no sort of fucking around between songs where you're like, so how's everyone doing tonight? And the whole crowd's just like,
yeah. No, I get that.
what?
I think
like, play the songs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, just play the songs and fuck off. Yeah, I get that. And I think spontaneity can be really cool. We've played some short notice shows that have, as you say, turned out to be really good. But generally, I quite like to be able to plan stuff.
Yeah.
There's a couple of instances that I can think of. One of them was a wedding that I was at as a guest, and the band that they booked for wedding hadn't turned up.
Yeah.
So there were lots of very, very sort of quiet and quite stressful phone calls from me to the boys in Biproxy saying, "Lads, can you play a show tonight?"
Yeah.
And they were like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm at this wedding, but the band haven't turned up." And they're like, "You're fucking joking." I'm like, "No." So they were like, "Well, we'll have to see what we can do." So then I gave them like 5-10 minutes to see what they could do. And then like just as we were about to start like basically throwing gear in the car and getting it prepped to come and play this wedding, the band turn up. So of course then I stood everybody down like, that's right, the band are here. But like that would have been a crazy spontaneous show, and it probably would have been great. But the initial kind of shock of the band aren't here, like this is somebody's wedding and the band haven't turned up. And we were like, holy shit, if we end up playing this, it's going to be the shortest notice show in history.
Yeah.
So spontaneity can be really cool, but at the same time, it could also be quite kind of, oh, okay, Jesus Christ. All right, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah, I think spontaneity can be cool with a caveat of if you are prepared. If you only have 3 songs, do not do it. Wait. Stow it away for a bit. Get a proper set. It's the same as I imagine being a comedian and having 3 jokes.
Yeah, you have to have you have to have the material to fill the time, don't you?
Yeah, you can have all the will in the world and all the ambition in the world, but if you don't actually have the product and the substance, then you're just going to make a bit of a fool of yourself. So.
I think that's probably one of the most important things I ever learned is that your set will always go quicker at shows than it does in practice.
Yeah.
Every single time, you'd play a set in practice and be like, oh, we'll sort of play it like we're at a show, and then you'd finish the set and be like, that was, an hour and 40 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
You get there and actually play it at a show and it's an hour and 15 minutes because the adrenaline's up and you're just that little bit quicker. You're just that little bit faster in the tempo's up by maybe 5 BPM because of the adrenaline, or the crowd's not quite as involved, so you've got not quite so much interaction. So rather than sit there talking to nobody, you just crack on with the next one, and then you just watch the time get shorter and shorter until you get to like the last 3 or 4 songs in the first set, and you're like, right, we've still got like another quarter of an hour, 20 minutes to fill. What the hell are we going to do? So it's one of the most important things I learned, is that your set list is always shorter than you think.
I remember having to elongate Free All Right Now to about a 12-minute song, and it's usually about a 3-minute song. But we just kept going with the chorus on loop because the George, as we've mentioned in part 1, were very, very solid on the fact that you had to play for 3 hours. You could play an hour, have a 10-minute break, play an hour, have a 10-minute break, and then play an hour, or you could play an hour and a half and have a 20-minute break and then another hour and a half. But sometimes we had to get a bit scrappy because fundamentally, to me, Desert Rose was a covers band that could play originals, and over time that kind of skewed towards the originals, and we wanted to make it. But Biproxy had a similar thing where you had quite a lot of originals and quite a lot of covers, and you kind of had to tailor the set list to the venue you were playing.
Yeah, that's accurate. Certainly in the the early days, towards kind of the the latter days of certainly my involvement, we were predominantly a covers band, because what we found was that although you'd have some people in the audience that wanted to listen to original material, there were quite a lot of places where they weren't all that interested. So what would happen is you'd lose people, and then if you're losing people, then the bar looks at the building and goes, all our customers have fucked off. What's gone on? Whereas if you play a set full of stuff that people know, they tend to stick around a bit more. So that was kind of the decision that we made, having tried to do the originals thing previously and in Shallow Bay and so on and so forth. I kind of went along with it because it was a sensible decision, But I still enjoy the creative process of original material, but you do kind of limit your audience a little bit. You play a bar on a Saturday night, people want to hear stuff like Mr. Brightside. They want to hear stuff like I Predict to Right. They want to hear the big tracks that they know. So you end up doing that kind of stuff to basically cater to your audience. So
one of the biggest shows I think Biproxy played, from my experience, we briefly spoke about this actually last week, Tim, was you supported Glamour of the Kill at the Weymouth Pavilion.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
A very strange lineup.
For us to be opening for. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hell, we had a great time. It was great fun. But it was definitely we were definitely kind of the white elephants in that bill, because the rest of the bands were far heavier than we were. And it was great. It was a really fun show. I had a good time. It was great to get some exposure to a reasonably large audience. But we were definitely a little bit out of place on that bill, but at the same time we were the local band, so because the other bands were based in other parts of the country or in some area. So it was good fun. It was definitely a strange bill for us to be on.
Would you say, in terms of like Kerrang popularity, or however you want to sort of give it a barometer, would you say that's the biggest show that you've played in terms of supporting a band of that caliber, or would you say that your headline shows were probably?
No, I think that was probably it was the most commercial show I think we've ever played. Because you had you had a signed act in Glamour of the Kill, and then you had Cypher 16 who play shows all over the place, and then you had a couple of very, very popular kind of more local bands in the Ashira and As Flames Rise, I think it was, and they were popular more Dorset, Somerset based bands, because I think the Ashira were based in Yeovil.
That's correct.
And they were quite a popular act. As Flames Rise were quite a popular act. So So it was probably the most commercial show we've played.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of people knowing who the bands were. But as to the thing with the shows that we headlined were where we were playing the pub shows is that you were literally playing the Saturday night pub circuit to basically go out and play some shows and earn some beer tokens. So I don't want to kind of over egg it and make it sound like we were like massive, because obviously we kind of weren't. What we did have, we had a reasonably good local reputation. So that was, and we were quite happy with that. I mean, obviously, every musician when they start playing music wants to write this seminal record, get signed to Sony or EMI, and make a hell shitload of money, because that's why people become musicians, obviously. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen for everybody. I never expected to start playing music and end up where I ended up, meeting some of the people that I've met, playing some of the venues that I've played, because I've obviously played a few venues around the UK as well, and some of them were quite popular venues. So we like the Cavern in Exeter, and the White Rabbit in Plymouth. I always remember playing the show at the Cavern because there was a Muse poster from when they played there. And we were like, oh, Jesus Christ, so I always remember playing those kind of special venues because they were slightly bigger kind of stages for us to be on. But yeah, I've kind of lost my train.
That's all right.
A little bit, but so everybody wants to become this big famous musician. When I was young, I wanted to be. Well, say when I was young. When I was younger, I wanted to be the next Nick McBrain. That was my kind of thing. And then I discovered Chris Adler from Lamb of God, and became an avid Chris Adler fan. Still am a huge fan of Chris Adler's work. Still am a huge fan of Lamb of God. But then I wanted to go exploring the heavier side of life, and then I just kind of went from there.
Yeah. So the Ashira, the drummer of that band, has been on here before. He's called Dan Olds, and he's now in a band called Palm Reader.
Oh yeah, I know
quite successful.
Palm Reader. I know Palm Reader. Yeah.
They've done quite a lot of stuff. So shout out to Dan. Definitely go check out Palm Reader, guys, if you fancy it. If you like being shouted at, then love it. That's the band for you. So we got some quick fire questions, Tim.
Oh, go on.
I think I've sent you these before. Let me just grab them because they are.
I'm pretty sure you have.
They are in another note.
The famous notes.
Yeah, my notes are insane. So, okay, let's quickly do this one before we do the quick fire question, because I'm trying to integrate this one into the episode now. Favorite children's TV show or two?
Oh man. So children's TV show, Thundercats was probably a good one, and probably Rainbow, because I always thought that was hilarious. I was convinced that they were all on loads of drugs when they were creating that.
Definitely. First phone that you ever had and the ringtone.
I can't remember the ringtone, but it was an old BT Cellnet handset they did. I remember it because it was yellow, bright. Yeah, it was bright yellow. It was hideous, but actually it meant I never lost it because it was bright yellow. But as to the ringtone, not a clue. Not a clue.
Let's pretend it's like a really monophonic version of Run to the Hills or something.
Yeah, it was probably something like that, to be fair.
Nice. Right, so quick fire questions. Is a Kinder Egg a toy, or is it a deliciously chocolate treat with a bonus toy inside of it?
It's definitely a chocolate treat with a bonus toy inside of it for me, yeah.
Do you like the chocolate?
Yeah, it's not my favourite, but I'll eat it if it's there.
Okay. All right, I'll have to bear that in mind. I might have to drop one at your desk.
Fair.
Baby Bell or cheese string?
Baby Bell, 100%.
That was quick. I like that. That is quick fire.
Yeah, 100%.
Camping in a tent or a static caravan for 1 week?
Tent all day, every day.
Living in a city or living in the countryside?
Living in the countryside, absolutely.
Chocolate or sweets?
Depends on the sweet. But generally it will be chocolate.
Okay. Bath or shower?
Bath, 100%.
Interesting. Mornings or evenings?
Uh, Evening.
Mint choc chip or chocolate orange?
Mint chocolate chip.
Okay, nice. Minor inconveniences. So I've actually got free, which I'm quite surprised that I've got free. I don't usually come up with one a week, but I'm obviously in a way that I'm observing things that piss me off more. To start with, though, I just want to quickly go on a bit of a monologue about my experience at IKEA yesterday because I'm still shaking about it, to be honest.
Oh God! Right,
First
okay.
time my girlfriend's ever been to IKEA. We drove up to Southampton. We got all the stuff. We realised on the way to Southampton that the coffee table that we wanted for our new place was actually sold out. It was a rectangular table. And we measured everything in our house, our flat, sorry. The one thing we forgot to mention, Tim, the one thing we forgot to measure was the car. So on the way up to Southampton, we realised that we need a round coffee table because the rectangular coffee table was sold out, right? I tried so fucking hard to get this round coffee table, which was obviously bigger, into the back of my car, through the boot of my car, and it just was not going in the back. It was not going through the side. So naturally, me being the responsible adult that I am,
Yeah.
I had a full-on breakdown. And I
no.
basically just completely declared myself out of the world for a couple of minutes. I'd actually also paid for the multi-story car park ticket. So at that point, you have 15 minutes to leave the building. Otherwise, that barrier is not coming up. So my girlfriend's wheeling this coffee table back to IKEA, and we're getting it delivered in a couple of days. So it's not all bad news. But just that moment, man, of like, it was like that close to getting in the car, you know?
Yeah.
Not good. Are you a fan of IKEA?
I think I've been like once. I'm not generally a fan of furniture shopping.
Yeah.
I'm not generally a fan of shopping in general. I find supermarkets are probably one of my sort of fairly large inconveniences as opposed to a minor one because I find that people just never get out of my way, and I get it, but like I'm not exactly difficult to miss, and yet people just walk into me and shit, and I'm like, what the hell? Like I'm stood here. Why have you just run me over with your trolley, you specimen? It's just one of those. But but yeah, I think I'd like to go back to IKEA because everybody tells me about the meatballs.
Yeah.
They're all like, you've got to get those meatballs.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall ever eating IKEA meatballs, so I might have to rectify this. At some point.
So I've now got a theory based on yesterday that because the restaurant is in the centre of IKEA, especially at Southampton, so you spend about 45 minutes to an hour in the front half of IKEA, and you find yourself just walking through. The middle section is basically a cafeteria, and you will eat anything at that point because you're so hungry, because IKEA is basically its own world and you're kind of shut into this massive building. And I reckon they could actually serve up like gruel and people would buy it because they just need energy to get through the other part of IKEA.
I mean,
they can charge what they want. They can you can eat whatever they put out, that sort of thing.
I can't fault the logic, even if it is a little bit Orwellian. But
there we go.
Bit Victorian mentality, but no, that's fair enough, I suppose.
I hope I haven't ruined the experience for you before you've even been.
No, you're right. You'll be fine.
I've got two more minor inconveniences, so I'll give you some time to think. One is proper minor, which is when you go to a shop, ketchup and barbecue sauce, the lid isn't quite on. So you have to like screw it back. But I think the reason they do that is so that it shows that the lid is like secure. And
Yeah.
you obviously have to take off that little bit of film, don't you, to start with, so that
Yes,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
actually get to the source.
Yeah,
But I've just noticed that quite a lot lately. Maybe it's just me moving house and noticing that I'm buying lots of new
yeah,
stuff. And
maybe.
the second one is the people that made fitted sheets for your duvet
You and fitted
can
sheets, man. You
fuck
got, you have a
off
problem
because
with
it
fitted sheets.
doesn't work.
You
I
have
will
a
die
problem.
on this hill. Fitted sheets are fucking shit. All right,
Oh dear.
there we go.
Oh dear
I'm
me.
done.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen anybody get so animated over fitted sheets.
There we go.
Oh dear. Excuse me. Right.
Right.
So I think the biggest one for me, you've got those tins of like processed meat, like spam and stuff.
Yeah.
You've got to roll the metal rim around the thing to open it. Yeah. You know the ones
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
Well, when they sort of break, like halfway around the can, like the frustration that I feel when they break in the wrong place, like I actually want to genocide the immediate area. I get so frustrated by it. It's a
Yeah.
really minor thing because
Course.
like normally you're most of the way around and you can just kind of force the issue and get into it. But
Yeah.
honestly, it makes me want to hit things with sticks. Like it's so frustrating. So that's probably one. As for the other one, not being able to find a pair of socks. Like
Hmm.
I get up in the morning, I go into my sock drawer,
Hmm.
and I pick out what I think is a pair of socks, and it turns out to be two odd socks where I've
Hmm.
done the laundry or whatever, and then I've
Yeah.
actually put the wrong. Again, really minor thing, but like it's just something that not a pair of socks. What the hell? It's really sort
Yeah.
of minor stuff, but it is an inconvenience, and
It
it's
is.
like you just feel yourself going, I have not had enough coffee to deal with.
Yeah.
It's just one of
Yeah.
those. But yeah, I think that
Love it.
those are the two that kind of stick out for me, really.
Think what
On
I'm
that.
gonna do when I've done like the whole of season 12, which is what we're on now. I'm gonna give
Season
myself,
12
yeah,
or
man. I've been
12
doing
six.
this
Fuck my ass.
nearly
Um,
150 episodes, mate, of
God
me talking
damn.
about fitted sheets. Not really.
They're losing it over fitted sheets.
Fitted
Oh dear.
sheets podcast. What I'll do is I'll create like an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll have everyone's minor inconveniences, and I'll be able to like categorize them and say whether or not I think they are legit. I'll probably do like a tier list, like the YouTube thing where everyone's got like S, A, B, D, blah blah blah.
Yeah. What is this?
Um,
Podcast analytical or some shit.
yeah, exactly. And I want to go through everyone's meal deal because we've retired that question now.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that leads me quite nicely. We've only got about 7 minutes left, and then Zoom
All right.
will literally just end.
Fair
Favorite
enough.
fast food?
Favorite fast food, Burger King.
Nice, solid.
Granted, I don't eat it very often.
Yeah.
Because it's horrendously bad for me. But
Yeah.
given the choice between McDonald's and Burger King will win out every time.
Nice,
Um,
love that. Plans for the future? Are you still drumming? Do you have
um,
some plans to do some recordings?
so I
What's
want
it look
to.
like?
So I'm talking to a few people about doing some stuff this year because I've had a bit of a break from the band scene with like my new job and stuff, and I just after so long of being just in it for like week in week out for as long as I've been it, I just needed a little bit of downtime on it because actually I was starting to lose like the passion for it a little bit. So I kind of stepped away because I was just getting a bit burnt out. So, but I want to pick up again this year and just go in a slightly different direction because both the bands I was in, certainly recently, both Biproxy and MD were, quite middle of the road sort of indie sort of style. And as much fun as that is, it's not a style that I particularly enjoy. So I want to start kind of exploring the stuff that I like to listen to, which means that I've got a reasonable learning curve because some of it's quite advanced, and B, it just needs a little bit of work, and I've got to find people that have kind of like-minded and want to do the same sort of stuff. So there's a few things going, a few discussions being had, and hopefully we'll get something together and start something up a little bit later this year and just go back to making some noise.
Nice. So recordings first, then gigs, or just test the water with some gigs and see what happens, go from there?
I don't know, mate. Depends on who I get. Depends on what happens in terms of, if we get in the room and the stuff comes together really quickly, then we'll do the recordings first. If we get in the room and just smash out some tracks, then we might go and play some shows.
Yeah.
Really depends on how quickly it all comes together, because recording is a time-consuming process,
Absolutely.
and things have got to be pretty tidy before you get into a studio.
Yeah, completely.
Because it's really, really easy to lose a whole shitload of time in a studio if stuff isn't quite right. So,
and time is money, boys.
In a studio, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
You can do sort of 300 quid, 400 quid a day in a studio. So yeah, that hour is money. Like, that hour you spend redoing something that you should probably have had prepared before you went in there is money. So
absolutely. Speaking of bands, just to end this up just to sort of put it all in a nice little bow, we've got Graveyard Bookies, which was a band that I had on in the past. They've just released a song which is up on their YouTube channel called Johnny Two Sheds, and the music video has a narrative of do not go to someone that has two sheds because there's a high chance he might be a serial killer. So definitely go check that out, guys. And yeah, let them know I sent you. Give them a like on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. And nice. Let me just quickly, it's Jeff Kinch's band. So I've had him on in the past and interviewed him. I've never actually met him, but definitely go give that video a listen and let them know what you think, all right? But yeah, this has been Absolute Bedlam Podcast. I've had Tim Haines on as a guest. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And thank you for listening, watching, and viewing. So speak to you all soon. I don't know why I say watching and viewing. Anyway, there we go. Yep. That's what I'm leaving this on now. So take it or leave it, all right? Cheers, Tim. Speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.
Keep it Bedlam, guys. Keep it Bedlam. Bye.
Absolute Bedlam.
Shanty Spirit, based in Bournemouth, UK. Dorset Botanical Seaweed Vodka. So I met these at Bournemouth Air Show 2 years ago, and I wanted to get them on the podcast, which I've done in the previous episode, and I wanted to speak to them and promote their products because I think they're onto a winner. So this is vacuum distilled for fresher flavours. Lots and lots of different seaweeds go into this amazing vodka. Doesn't taste like the usual stuff that you get from the supermarkets. It's got a bit of a sort of story to it and a bit more of a twist. It's had some awards, and I'm hooking you guys up. If you go to www.shantyspirit.com and you type in the code Bedlam discount for either 20cl or 70cl bottles, then you'll get 10% off your purchase. Shanty Spirit, drink to enjoy, drink responsibly.
Absolute Bedlam.